A wealthy black man goes undercover as a regular shopper to one of his luxury stores. The location's owner does not recognize the man and makes racist remarks towards the black man. The next day, the owner is shocked when he is called to the company headquarters and sees the black man again. John Bennett stood at the corner of Fifth Avenue, blending into the bustling crowd of New York City. The fall breeze carried a hint of chill, ruffling the hem of his casual black jacket. John pulled his baseball cap lower, obscuring his face as he watched the people stream past the glass-fronted luxury store he owned, a tall building with sleek lines. Elegance was embossed in gold lettering above the entrance. Shoppers moved in and out, bags swinging, the store's sophisticated decor visible through its large windows. Taking a deep breath, John stepped forward, pushing open the heavy glass door. A soft chime announced his entry. Inside the store was a world of polished marble floors, plush velvet seating, and carefully arranged displays of high-end fashion and jewelry. The scent of expensive cologne hung in the air, mingling with the soft jazz music playing in the background. John had designed this space to be welcoming, a place where luxury met comfort, but today he felt like an outsider. Dressed in dark jeans, sneakers, and a plain black jacket, he looked nothing like the store's typical clientele. That was the point. He wanted to see how customers were treated without the influence of his title or status. He'd done this before in other locations, but today was different. Today he was back in his hometown checking on one of the stores he was most proud of. John wandered over to a display case filled with designer watches. He admired the craftsmanship, the fine details of each piece. He knew them well, he had a hand in selecting the collections, but today he was just another customer. Out of the corner of his eye, John saw Richard Coleman, the store's franchise owner, standing near the counter. Richard was in his mid-50s, with thinning gray hair and a sharp suit that seemed a little too tight around the middle. He was talking to a woman in a designer dress, his voice low and polite, a rehearsed smile on his face. As John moved closer to the watch display, Richard's gaze flicked over to him. The smile faded, replaced by a slight frown. John pretended not to notice. He picked up a watch from the display, a sleek silver piece with a leather strap. He turned it over in his hands, appreciating its weight. "Excuse me," John said, keeping his voice light, "could you tell me more about this watch?" Richard approached, his steps slow and deliberate. He looked John up and down, taking in the casual clothes, the baseball cap. His expression was guarded, almost dismissive. "That's one of our limited edition models," Richard said. His voice had a clipped, perfunctory tone, very exclusive. "It might not be what you're looking for." John kept his smile. "Oh, why is that?" Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. "It's a very high-end piece, quite expensive. Maybe you'd be interested in something more accessible." John felt a flicker of irritation. He knew Richard didn't recognize him, but the assumption behind his words was clear. John decided to push a little further. "I like high-end pieces," John replied calmly. "What makes this one special?" Richard sighed, as if he was being forced to perform a tedious task. "It's crafted by one of the finest watchmakers in Switzerland, the materials are top tier, and the craftsmanship is unparalleled. It's a collector's item, really, limited to a very small number of pieces worldwide." John nodded thoughtfully, still holding the watch. "Sounds impressive. How much does it cost?" Richard hesitated for a moment, his eyes scanning John's face as if searching for a sign of whether he could afford it. "It's priced at $122,000, he said finally, with a hint of reluctance, "but as I said, we have other options that might be more in line with your budget." John's smile remained, but inside he felt a familiar frustration. He placed the watch back in the display case gently, looking at Richard. "And if I wanted to buy this one?" Richard's eyes flickered with annoyance. "Well, I'd need to see proof of payment first. We don't just let anyone walk out with our best pieces." John's expression didn't change, but his patience was wearing thin. I see, so it's store policy to question customers' ability to pay before making a sale? Richard's tone became defensive. It's not about questioning, it's about ensuring the integrity of our brand and maintaining our image. We can't just let anyone handle our merchandise. John held Richard's gaze for a moment longer, then looked away, nodding slightly. I understand, he said softly, turning away from the display case. John started to walk toward the door. He could feel Richard's eyes on his back, could almost hear the man's thoughts as he silently judged him. John pushed open the door and stepped back out into the cool air of the city, his mind already turning over what had just happened. He had come to observe, to see the reality of his stores without his usual presence, and now he had, but what he had witnessed was disappointing, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. As he stood on the sidewalk, blending back into the stream of passers-by, John knew this visit would not end here. He had seen enough to know that action was needed. John Bennett stood outside the store for a moment, gathering his thoughts. He had come here to observe, but what he had experienced so far made his blood simmer with anger. Taking a deep breath, he turned back toward the glass door and walked inside again, determined to see if this was an isolated incident or a pattern. The soft chime rang once more as he stepped into the store. This time he didn't bother looking around. He headed straight for the section where Richard Coleman had been standing. Richard was still near the counter, now checking his phone. When he saw John approaching, his eyes narrowed. The earlier condescension hadn't been an accident, John realized. Richard's expression was the same, a mix of annoyance and superiority. John took another deep breath, reminding himself of his purpose. He approached a display of designer coats, running his fingers over the fine fabric. The coat was dark, elegantly cut, perfect for fall. John picked it up, holding it in front of himself to get a better look. "Excuse me," John said, his voice calm and polite, "could you tell me more about this coat?" Richard looked up from his phone, eyes flicking from the coat to John's face. He hesitated for a moment, then put his phone away and walked over, the fake smile returning. "That's one of our premium items," Richard said, his tone just as clipped as before. "Italian wool, handcrafted. It's from our latest collection, very exclusive." John nodded, examining the coat. "It's nice. How much is it?" Richard's smile tightened. "It's priced at $2,500, he said, enunciating each word as if explaining to a child. "These are meant for our high-end customers. We don't usually keep this kind of merchandise out for just anyone to touch." John raised an eyebrow but kept his tone neutral. "I see, so you keep some items out of reach of your regular customers?" Richard's face hardened, the polite facade slipping. "Our regular customers know what they can afford and what they can't," he said curtly. "We cater to a specific clientele here, people who appreciate quality and have the means to purchase it." John placed the coat back on its hanger, taking his time. He felt the frustration rising again, but forced himself to remain calm. "I appreciate quality," he said evenly, "and I think I might be interested in this coat." Richard's eyes flickered with a mix of irritation and disbelief. He took a step closer, lowering his voice as if trying to keep their conversation private. "Look," Richard said, a hint of condescension creeping into his tone, "I don't mean to offend, but perhaps you should look at some of our more affordable options. There's no point wasting time on items that are out of your range." John's patience was thinning rapidly. He met Richard's gaze, his voice firm but controlled. "You don't know what my range is," John replied, "and assuming you do based on how I look is not good business practice." Richard's expression tightened further. He looked John up and down, clearly assessing him again. "We have an image to maintain," Richard said slowly, as if speaking to someone who didn't understand the rules. "We can't just have anyone come in and handle our most valuable items. It's about preserving the brand." John held Richard's gaze, his anger now clear in his eyes. Preserving the brand, John echoed, by judging people based on their appearance? That's not how you build loyalty or respect. Richard crossed his arms, his posture stiffening. Our customers appreciate exclusivity. They don't want to see just anyone in here touching everything. It's about the experience, the environment. It's what sets us apart. John let out a slow breath, his eyes never leaving Richard's. And you think treating potential customers with disrespect is part of that experience? Richard shrugged, a smug look crossing his face. I think I know my customers better than you do. It's my job to protect the integrity of the store. John didn't respond immediately. He looked around the store, taking in the displays, the carefully arranged merchandise, the other customers who were beginning to notice the tension between them. Then he turned back to Richard. Thank you for your time, John said finally, his voice cool. I think I've seen everything I need to see. Without waiting for a response, John turned on his heel and walked away, heading for the door. The chime rang softly as he stepped outside, back into the cool air of the city. This time, John didn't linger on the sidewalk. He walked briskly down the street, his mind racing. What he had experienced was unacceptable, not just as a businessman, but as a person who believed in treating others with respect. He had come to see the reality of his store's operations, and now he had. John's jaw clenched as he thought about Richard's condescending tone, his dismissive attitude. This wasn't just about a coat or a watch, it was about the values John had built his company on, values that were clearly not being upheld in the store. As John walked, his anger began to transform into determination. He knew what he needed to do. Today he had been treated as just another customer, judged by his appearance, dismissed without a second thought. Tomorrow he would come back, not as John Bennett the customer, but as John Bennett the owner, and things were going to change. John spent the night replaying the interactions in his mind, each word from Richard sharpening his resolve. By morning, his frustration had turned into a clear plan. He would return to the store and dig deeper. He wanted to see if Richard's behavior extended beyond his own experience. If Richard treated him this way, how did he treat others? John was determined to find out. Dressed again in his casual attire, jeans, sneakers, and the same black jacket, John walked back into the luxury store. The chime above the door sounded, announcing his arrival. The store was quieter than the day before, with fewer customers browsing. John headed directly to the jewelry section, this time his eyes landing on a glass case displaying an array of diamond bracelets and necklaces. Each piece sparkled under the soft lighting, their price tags discreetly tucked away. As John studied a particularly intricate bracelet, he noticed Richard out of the corner of his eye. Richard was standing near the back of the store, talking to a young woman with a concerned expression on her face. It was Sarah Moore, the assistant manager. She was nodding as Richard spoke, her hands nervously fidgeting with a clipboard. John strained to hear snippets of their conversation. I don't care if he's a potential customer. Richard's voice was low but firm. We have a standard to maintain. Keep an eye on him. Sarah glanced over in John's direction, her face a mixture of worry and sympathy. She caught John's eye briefly before looking away. John pretended not to notice, continuing to look at the jewelry. He knew now that Richard was instructing his staff to be wary of him. The realization solidified John's decision to confront Richard again, but this time he would see how far Richard's bias extended. John selected a diamond necklace, motioning for a sales associate to assist him. A young woman approached, her expression polite but reserved. Good morning, John said with a warm smile. Could you tell me more about this necklace? The sales associate glanced over her shoulder at Richard, who was now watching them closely. She hesitated, then looked back at John. This is one of our signature pieces, she said quietly. It's crafted with the finest diamonds and set in platinum. It's priced at $15,000. John nodded appreciatively. It's beautiful, he said. could I take a closer look? Before the associate could respond, Richard walked over, his expression stern. Is there a problem here? Richard asked, directing his question to the associate rather than John. No problem, John said calmly, stepping in. I was just asking about this necklace. I'd like to inspect it further. Richard's eyes flashed with irritation. I don't think that's necessary, he said, his voice laced with condescension. As I mentioned before, we have other pieces that might be more suitable for you. John kept his gaze steady, refusing to be dismissed. I'm interested in this one, he said firmly. I'd like to see how it looks. Richard crossed his arms, his patience clearly wearing thin. Our policy is to reserve pieces like this for customers who are serious about purchasing. I can't have just anyone trying out our most valuable items. John's calm demeanor slipped, his frustration surfacing. And what makes you think I'm not serious? Richard looked John up and down, his sneer unmistakable. Experience, Richard said coldly. I know who can afford what. It's my job to protect the integrity of this store and its brand. We have a reputation to uphold. John felt his temper rising, but he kept his voice steady. And you uphold that reputation by judging people based on how they look, by refusing service to someone because you think they don't belong? Richard's expression didn't change. It's not personal, it's business. Our customers expect a certain level of exclusivity. I can't afford to waste time on people who aren't serious buyers. John took a step closer, lowering his voice. And how many serious buyers have you turned away because you made assumptions? How many people have you disrespected because you decided they didn't fit your idea of a customer? Richard's jaw tightened. I run this store the way I see fit, he said sharply, and frankly, I don't have to explain myself to you. John held Richard's gaze, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. You may not have to explain yourself to me, John said quietly, but you will have to answer to someone. This kind of treatment isn't just bad for business, it's wrong. Richard's eyes flickered with uncertainty for a moment before his expression hardened again. If you don't like how things are done here, you're welcome to leave, he said dismissively. There are plenty of other stores that might suit your tastes. John took a deep breath, stepping back. He glanced at Sarah, who was watching the exchange with a worried expression. Thank you for your time, John said to Richard, his voice cold. I'll be sure to let the right people know how you run your store. With that, John turned on his heel and walked out of the store. The door's chime seemed to echo louder than before as he stepped back onto the bustling street. John knew what he had to do next. He had seen enough to understand that Richard's behavior was not an isolated incident. It was a mindset, a way of thinking that needed to be addressed. As John walked away, his resolve solidified. He had hoped for a different outcome, but now he was certain change was necessary, and it was going to start at the top. John spent the night preparing for what needed to be done. The next morning he didn't return to the luxury store. Instead he headed straight to his company's headquarters, a sleek glass building in Midtown Manhattan. Inside, the atmosphere was one of quiet efficiency. Phones ringing softly, employees moving purposefully through the halls. John walked into the executive conference room, a large space with a long polished table and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He took a seat at the head of the table, his expression calm but resolute. John had arranged for Richard Coleman to meet him here under the pretense of discussing store performance and future goals. John knew this would ensure Richard showed up. John's assistant, Lisa, stood by the door, waiting for Richard to arrive. Soon, Richard entered the room, his usual air of confidence wrapped around him like a cloak. He wore a sharp suit and his face carried a look of curiosity mixed with a hint of annoyance. Clearly he thought he was being called in for another routine checkup, perhaps even to receive praise for his work at the store. Richard's steps faltered slightly when he saw John sitting at the head of the table. His eyes widened in surprise, and he glanced at Lisa, then back at John. He was clearly struggling to place John, confusion flashed across his face. John remained silent for a moment, allowing Richard to absorb the scene. Then he spoke, his voice calm and authoritative. "Take a seat, Richard," John said, gesturing to a chair across the table. Richard hesitated for a moment before pulling out a chair and sitting down. "Good morning, Mr. Bennet," Richard said cautiously. "I wasn't expecting to see you here. Is everything all right?" John leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady. "No, Richard, everything is not all right. I've come to discuss some serious concerns about your behavior at the store." Richard's eyes flickered with confusion, then with an attempt at his usual confidence. "Concerns about what?" "I've been running the store the way I always have. Sales are up, and the brand image is strong. If there's a problem, I'd be happy to address it." John's expression remained unchanged. "Sales numbers aren't the issue here, Richard. The issue is how you treat people. I visited your store yesterday. You didn't recognize me because I came as a regular customer, dressed casually." Realization dawned on Richard's face, quickly followed by a flash of panic. His mouth opened then closed as he tried to think of a response. John continued before he could speak. "I saw firsthand how you judge me based on my appearance," John said, his voice calm but firm. "You made assumptions, you were dismissive, and you refused to provide the same level of service you would for someone you deemed worthy customer. This isn't just about how you treated me, it's about how you likely treat others, anyone who doesn't fit your narrow view of who deserves respect." Richard swallowed hard, his face reddening. "Mr. Bennet, I didn't know it was you. If I had known," John cut him off. "That's exactly the problem. You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with basic human decency. This company stands for inclusivity and respect. We built our brand on the idea that luxury is not just about exclusivity, but about making people feel valued. You've turned my store into the opposite of what it's meant to be." Richard shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. "I was just trying to maintain the brand's image, to keep it exclusive and high-end. Our customers expect a certain atmosphere, a certain clientele." John's voice hardened. "Our customers expect quality products and respectful service, regardless of what they look like or how they dress. They deserve to feel welcome, not judged. Your behavior undermines everything this brand is supposed to represent." Richard's face was a mask of desperation now. "Mr. Bennet, please, I can change. I understand now. I'll do better. I'll implement training, whatever you need." John shook his head slowly. "It's too late for that, Richard. Your attitude isn't something that can be fixed with training. It's a fundamental problem with how you see people, and it's not something I can allow to continue, effective immediately. I'm terminating your franchise agreement. You're no longer responsible for that store." Richard's eyes widened in shock. "You can't be serious. I've been with this company for years. I've helped build that store's reputation. You can't just cut me off like this." John stood up, his gaze never wavering from Richard's. "Yes, I can, and I will. Your behavior reflects on the entire company, and I won't let one person's prejudices tarnish what we've built. Security will escort you out. You'll receive instructions on the termination process and what will happen next." Richard stood up as well, his face a mix of anger and disbelief. "You're making a huge mistake. I'm the best manager this company has. You'll regret this." John remained calm, his voice steady. "No, Richard, the mistake was allowing you to stay in a position where you could harm the company's values. I won't regret ensuring that my stores are run by people who understand what this brand truly stands for." Richard stared at John for a moment, then turned abruptly and stormed out of the room, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. John watched him leave, feeling a sense of resolution settle over him. It wasn't just about firing Richard, it was about protecting the integrity of his company and making sure that every customer felt valued and respected. John turned to Lisa, who had watched the entire exchange silently. "Make sure Richard is escorted out and that the transition process begins immediately," John said. Lisa nodded. "Yes, Mr. Bennet, I'll handle it." John walked over to the window, looking out over the city. He had taken a necessary step today. There would be more work to do, more changes to ensure that every store under his brand upheld the values he believed in. But for now, John felt a sense of calm. The message was clear: respect and integrity would always come first. John stood at the large windows of his office, looking out over the bustling streets of New York City below. The meeting with Richard had gone as he expected, but the sense of finality hadn't come with satisfaction. John knew firing Richard was necessary, but it was only one part of a larger issue. As he turned away from the window, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah Moore, the assistant manager at the store. She had agreed to meet him at the headquarters to discuss the store's future. John walked down the hallway to the conference room where Sarah was waiting. As he entered, Sarah stood up quickly, looking nervous. Her brown hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and she wore a simple blouse and skirt, her eyes reflecting a mixture of anxiety and hope. John gave her a reassuring smile. "Thank you for coming, Sarah," John said, gesturing for her to sit. "I know it's been a stressful couple of days." Sarah nodded, her hands clasping and unclasping in her lap. "Yes, Mr. Bennett, it has been. I heard about what happened with Richard. The staff is talking. They're worried about what's going to happen to the store." John sat down across from her. "I understand. That's why I wanted to talk to you. Richard's departure was necessary for the health of the company, but I know it leaves a lot of uncertainty. I want to make sure the store is in good hands going forward." Sarah nodded, her expression serious. "I appreciate that, Mr. Bennett. I've always tried to do my best at the store, but it's been difficult. Richard he had his way of doing things, and it didn't always align with what I thought was right." John watched her carefully. "I saw how you handled yourself in the store, Sarah. You stayed professional even when the situation was tense. That's why I'd like to offer you the position of interim manager. You know the staff, you know the store, and I believe you understand what this brand stands for." Sarah's eyes widened, surprise and relief flooding her face. "Interim manager," she repeated. "Mr. Bennett, I don't know what to say. I never expected this." John smiled. "Say you'll take it, and that you'll help me make sure the store reflects the values we believe in. I need someone I can trust to lead, someone who won't make the same mistakes Richard did." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she nodded. "Yes, Mr. Bennett, I'll do it. I'll do whatever it takes to make the store what it should be. I've always believed in treating every customer with respect, no matter what." John's expression softened. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear. You'll have my full support, and we'll work together to make the necessary changes. I want you to feel empowered to address any issues, to ensure that every customer feels welcome and valued." Sarah looked visibly relieved. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. I've always cared about the store and the people who work there. I just never felt like I had the authority to make a difference." John nodded. "You do now. I'll make sure you have the resources you need. We start with retraining for all staff, focusing on customer service and inclusion. I want every person who walks into that store to feel like they belong, whether they're buying a $10,000 watch or just browsing." Sarah's confidence seemed to grow as they spoke. "I can do that. I know the staff will respond well. They just need to know that their efforts are supported and that they're working in a positive environment." John leaned back in his chair, feeling a sense of satisfaction he hadn't felt in a while. "Good. I'll be checking in regularly, but I trust you to handle things on the ground. We're in this together, Sarah. The success of the store isn't just about profits, it's about building a community of respect and inclusivity." Sarah smiled, the tension leaving her shoulders. "I won't let you down, Mr. Bennett. I'll make sure the store represents the best of what your brand stands for." John stood up, offering his hand. "I know you will. Thank you for stepping up. I'm looking forward to seeing the positive changes you'll bring." Sarah shook his hand firmly, a new sense of purpose in her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. I'm looking forward to making a real difference." As Sarah left the conference room, John felt a renewed sense of optimism. The events of the past few days had been challenging, but they had also been a catalyst for necessary change. He knew there was more work to be done, more stores to visit, more managers to meet, but today was a step in the right direction. John returned to his office, looking out over the city once more. He thought about the people who walked through the doors of his stores every day, each with their own story, their own hopes and dreams. He had built his brand with the belief that everyone deserved to be treated with dignity, no matter who they were, and today he had taken action to ensure that belief was upheld. As the sun set over the skyline, John felt a quiet sense of pride. He wasn't just a businessman, he was a leader, and he had a responsibility to use his position to make a positive impact. With people like Sarah in place, he knew his stores would continue to thrive, not just as places of luxury, but as places where everyone felt welcome. The day after Richard's termination, John wasted no time in implementing changes at the store. He scheduled a meeting with the store staff to discuss the new direction and to reassure them that despite the abrupt shift in management, their jobs were secure and valued. He knew that stability and clear communication would be key in transitioning the store to a place that reflected the brand's values of inclusivity and respect. The meeting was held in a private conference room at the company headquarters, a smaller but equally elegant room compared to the one where John had confronted Richard. The staff filed in, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. Sarah Moore stood at the front with John, a clipboard in her hand, looking more confident than she had the day before. John stood up, addressing the room. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice calm and reassuring. "I know the past few days have been challenging, and I want to be transparent with you about what's happening. Richard Coleman is no longer with the company. His departure was necessary to realign our store's operations with the values we stand for as a brand." A murmur went through the room. John could see the questions in their eyes, the uncertainty about what this meant for them and their future at the store. He continued, maintaining eye contact with as many of them as possible. "I want to make it clear that your positions are not in jeopardy. We value each of you and the work you do. However, we will be making some changes to ensure that our store provides a welcoming environment for all customers, regardless of who they are or how they look. This isn't just about making sales, it's about building relationships and treating every person who walks through our doors with respect." Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady as the new interim manager. "I'll be leading our team in these efforts. We're going to focus on customer service training, and I'll be working closely with each of you to make sure we all understand what's expected. This isn't about pointing fingers. It's about growing together and improving how we interact with our customers." One of the sales associates, a young man named James, raised his hand. "What exactly does this training involve?" he asked, "and how long will it last?" John nodded at Sarah, who answered, "The training will cover everything from how to greet customers to handling sensitive situations. It will include workshops on cultural awareness and inclusivity. The goal is to make sure everyone feels empowered to provide the best possible service. We'll start with a series of short sessions over the next few weeks and we'll have ongoing training throughout the year." James nodded, seeming to accept the explanation. Another employee, an older woman named Lisa, spoke up. "And what happens if we see behavior that doesn't align with these values? Do we report it directly to you, Sarah?" John interjected, "Yes, you can report any concerns to Sarah, and you can also come directly to me. My door is always open. We take these issues seriously, and I want everyone to feel safe and supported in speaking up. We're building a culture of accountability and respect, and that starts with all of us." The staff nodded, and John could sense a shift in the room. The tension was easing, replaced by a cautious optimism. They weren't just hearing about changes, they were being involved in them. That was crucial to building trust. "Are there any other questions?" John asked, looking around the room. a young woman named Claire, who worked as a cashier, raised her hand. What if customers come in with the same attitude Richard had? How do we handle difficult situations where customers are being rude or discriminatory? Sarah answered, "That's a great question, Claire. Part of our training will include conflict resolution and de-escalation techniques. If you ever feel uncomfortable or if a customer is behaving inappropriately, don't hesitate to call on a manager. We want you to feel empowered to handle situations professionally, but we're also here to support you." John nodded in agreement. "Remember, you're not alone in this, we're a team, and we'll work together to make sure everyone feels respected, both staff and customers alike." The staff seemed to relax further, reassured by the clear plan and the support being offered. John felt a sense of relief himself. He knew these changes wouldn't solve every problem overnight, but they were a start. The store needed to be a place where everyone felt welcome and valued, and that required a commitment from everyone involved. "Thank you all for your time," John said, wrapping up the meeting. "I'm confident in each of you, and I believe we can make this store a model of what our brand stands for. Let's work together to make that happen." The staff began to file out, some stopping to ask Sarah quick questions, others heading back to their duties with a renewed sense of purpose. John watched them go, feeling hopeful. He had made the right decision in promoting Sarah. She was already showing leadership qualities that Richard had lacked, and her connection with the staff was clear. As the room emptied, John turned to Sarah. "You did well today," he said. "The staff respects you, and they're looking to you for guidance. Keep that momentum going." Sarah smiled, looking both relieved and determined. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. I won't let you down. I believe we can make a real difference here." John nodded. "I know you will. I'll be checking in regularly, but I trust you to handle things. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." Sarah agreed, and John left the conference room, his mind already moving to the next steps. There were other stores to visit, other managers to meet. The issue with Richard had been a wake-up call, a reminder that even the best intentions could be undermined by prejudice and poor leadership. As John walked through the halls of his headquarters, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The confrontation with Richard had been difficult, but it was necessary. Justice wasn't just about punishing wrongdoing, it was about creating an environment where such behavior wasn't tolerated. John was committed to building a company where respect, inclusivity, and integrity were more than just words on a mission statement. They were principles that guided every decision, every action, and every interaction. John knew there would be challenges ahead, but he was ready to face them. His commitment to his values and the support of leaders like Sarah gave him the confidence that they could make a real and lasting impact. The store was already showing signs of change. The atmosphere felt lighter, the staff more engaged and welcoming. John's decision to make Sarah interim manager had been a good one. She had organized the training sessions efficiently, and the team responded positively, eager to create a more inclusive and respectful environment. John had kept his promise to check in regularly. Today he decided to make an unannounced visit to see how things were progressing. As he entered the store, the familiar chime above the door sounded, and he was immediately greeted by James, the sales associate who had raised concerns during the staff meeting. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett," James said, smiling warmly. "It's great to see you." "Good morning, James," John replied, shaking his hand. "How's everything going?" James nodded enthusiastically. "Really well, actually. The training sessions have been helpful, and Sarah has been doing a great job. The whole team feels more connected, and we're all on the same page about how we want to treat our customers." John smiled. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Keep up the good work. I'm proud of how you all have handled this transition." As John moved further into the store, he noticed the customers being greeted warmly, staff members assisting without hesitation, and a general air of positivity. It was a stark contrast to the atmosphere he had encountered during his first visit when Richard was in charge. he felt a sense of satisfaction, seeing his vision being realized. John made his way to the back of the store where Sarah was talking to a customer. She glanced up, saw John, and excused herself. "Mr. Bennett, it's good to see you," Sarah said, her expression bright. "You too, Sarah," John said. "I just wanted to stop by and see how things were going. It looks like you've done a fantastic job." Sarah's face lit up with pride. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. The team has been amazing. They've really embraced the changes, and we're seeing positive feedback from customers. I think we're on the right track." John nodded. "I agree, you've turned things around here quickly, and I couldn't be more pleased with the progress. I'll continue to support you in any way I can." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of the door chime ringing loudly. John turned to see Richard Coleman standing at the entrance. Richard's suit was less crisp than usual, his face worn with worry. His eyes scanned the store, landing on John and Sarah. John's expression hardened slightly. He hadn't expected to see Richard here, especially not after their last encounter. Richard made his way over to them, his steps slower than usual, his posture less confident. "Mr. Bennett," Richard began, his voice almost pleading, "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, but I need to talk to you. Please give me a moment." John's face remained impassive. He glanced at Sarah, who looked surprised, eyes but stayed silent, then back at Richard. "All right, Richard," John said coolly, "you have a moment. What is it you want to say?" Richard took a deep breath, his shoulders sagging. "I came to apologize," John said. "I know I was wrong. I've had time to think about my behavior, and I realize now that I made a terrible mistake. I judged people unfairly. I let my prejudices get in the way of doing my job. I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett, truly, I am." John listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. Richard's eyes were pleading, his voice thick with desperation. "I'd been with the company for years," Richard continued. "I care about the brand, about the store. Please give me another chance. Let me prove that I can change, that I can run the store the way you want it to be run. I'll do anything." John was silent for a moment, letting Richard's words hang in the air. He thought about the countless times Richard had likely dismissed customers based on their appearance, the way he had treated John himself. Richard's sudden change of heart seemed more motivated by desperation than genuine remorse. "I appreciate your apology, Richard," John said finally, his voice calm but firm. "But this isn't just about one mistake, it's about a pattern of behavior, a mindset that you've demonstrated for years. What I saw in the store wasn't just an oversight, it was the result of a deep-seated attitude that doesn't align with our values." Richard's face fell, his eyes filling with a mix of frustration and despair. "Mr. Bennett, please," he begged. "I can learn, I can change, just give me the store back, and I'll prove it to you." John shook his head slowly. "The decision has been made, Richard. The store is doing well under Sarah's leadership, and the staff has responded positively to the changes. I can't go back to the way things were. My responsibility is to the company and to every customer who walks through those doors. Allowing you to return would undermine everything we've worked to achieve." Richard's shoulders slumped, his last hope fading. He looked at John, desperation turning to resignation. "I understand," he said quietly, almost to himself. John's voice softened slightly. "Richard, I hope you take this as an opportunity to reflect and grow. This isn't about punishment, it's about ensuring the right people are in place to uphold the values of the brand. I wish you the best in your future endeavors, but you won't be getting this store back." Richard nodded, his eyes downcast. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Bennett," he said quietly. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the store, his footsteps heavy. John watched him go, feeling a mix of pity and resolve. Richard's apology had come too late, the damage had been done, and John couldn't risk the integrity of his brand for the sake of giving Richard another chance. His responsibility was to his company, his employees, and his customers. Sarah stood quietly beside John, her expression one of relief. "Thank you for not letting him come back," she said softly. "I think the staff would have been worried if he did." John nodded. "I made my decision based on what's best for the store and the people who work here." "You've done a great job, Sarah. Keep up the good work. We're building something special, and I'm confident in your ability to lead." Sarah smiled, a sense of accomplishment shining in her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. I won't let you down." John looked around the store, watching as the staff interacted with customers, each engagement positive and welcoming. The change was real, and it was having a tangible impact. John felt a sense of pride and satisfaction. He knew there would be challenges ahead, but with strong leadership and a commitment to the company's values, those challenges could be met. As he left the store, John felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was what he had worked for, to create a brand that stood not just for luxury, but for respect, integrity, and inclusion. With the right people in place, he was confident that Vision would continue to thrive. So, what do you think? Have you ever witnessed or experienced a moment where someone's biases led to an unjust situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your stories. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Courageous Voices for more stories that highlight the fight for justice and change. Thank you for watching, and let's keep pushing for a better tomorrow.